When it comes to the topic of what-ifs in the NBA, the list is very extensive. From potential super teams, to failed super teams, to injuries, there are just a certain amount of things throughout history that we can only speculate about. And one of them, and probably the biggest ones in recent memory, is the Big Three Oklahoma City Thunder with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. And in case you're new to the NBA, yes, there was a point where all three of these guys were on the same team. And given that the main core of this team had just an average age of 22.5 years old, and they had already made the finals while being in the Western Conference, nobody really doubted the possibility of them winning multiple championships, or one ring at the very least. Instead, this core would fall apart over the next few seasons, with James Harden being traded just a few weeks after that finals took place, Serge Ibaka would get traded in June of 2016, then Kevin Durant would leave a couple weeks later, then finally Russell Westbrook in 2019. But now, even in 2020, people still wonder what this OKC team could have become if they were able to keep them together. And so, what exactly happened? How did this team that had so much potential just fall apart like this? Well, today, we're going to be talking about that young Thunder team, why they were so great, all the things they did accomplish, and ultimately, we're going to be discussing what led to everyone going their separate ways. But before we begin, if you're new here, I'm Double D. I'm a huge basketball fan, I make NBA videos here on YouTube. So if you're also an NBA fan, or just a basketball fan in general, feel free to hit the sub button and click the bell to be notified when I upload more videos just like this one. Alright, let's get into the video. So one thing to keep in mind is the fact that all three of these guys were not playing at an MVP level while they were together, and so they weren't really expected to be blowing through everybody. But at the same time, they were also expected to win at least one ring together. Given that they were only 22, 23 years old when they made the finals, people were expecting OKC to retool around them for years to come and possibly become a new super team. But as we all know, this didn't end up happening. And so how did this team even come about? Well, for starters, this was one of the only big threes in recent memory that was built through the draft instead of free agency. The Sonics drafted Kevin Durant at number 2 in 2007, and he would play in Seattle for one season before the team would end up relocating to Oklahoma City. A story which can honestly have its own video, but anyway, Kevin Durant in his rookie season would average 20.4 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.4 assists, a steal and a block, and shoot 43% from the field. But this would not even matter, as the Sonics would end up finishing with just a 20-62 record that season. And with this, they drafted 2 picks in the first round. And they used these picks to draft Russell Westbrook at number 4, and Serge Ibaka at number 24. But this is weird because although the Thunder drafted him, Serge Ibaka had decided to stay in Spain to work on his game even further by joining a league in Europe. And so he would end up playing there after reaching an agreement with OKC. And so the Thunder had another not so great season, winning just 23 games, but it was clear that KD and Russell Westbrook would be their future, with KD averaging 23.3 points on 47.6% from the field, and Russell Westbrook averaging 17 points on 40%. But with the terrible record, they were again given a high overall pick in the 2009 draft. And they used this to draft James Harden at number 3. And this would be their key going forward, but they would also be able to buy out Serge Ibaka's contract with his team overseas, and they would sign him to a 2-year contract. So for the 2009-2010 season, they now have their entire core that we would see for years. As in, just that one-off season, we would see them improve from 23 wins to 50 wins, more than doubled in the previous season. With Kevin Durant now transforming into a superstar in just his 3rd year in the league, KD would average 30.1 points, 7.6 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.4 steals, and a block while shooting 47.6% from the field. He was 21 years old. And Westbrook would also make an improvement by averaging 16.1 points and 8 assists while shooting 43%. However, the Thunder season would be ended by the Lakers in the first round. And if you're keeping track, yes, they won 50 games and they were the 8th seed. And they actually almost took the Lakers to 7 games, but would have their season ended by Pau Gasol of all people.
Seconds left. Ready to go. Kobe, baseline fall away. No. Gasol, yes, on the follow! Pau Gasol timing things with a half a second to play. Way to come up big.
But even then, the fact that they almost took that team to 7 games with their main core still being in their early 20s, that was a very scary thing to see. And the next season would prove this, as they won 55 games and were the 4th seed in the Western Conference. And this time, KD and Westbrook were the clear duo, as KD would average 25.6 points, 6.3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal and a block while shooting 46.2% overall and 35% from 3. And Westbrook averaging 22.7 points, 4.8 rebounds, 8.5 assists, and 2 steals while shooting 44% from the field. And James Harden would also improve significantly from the season before, going from 9 points to 16 points and establishing himself as their sixth man. And they would end up getting to the Western Conference Finals before being taken out by the soon-to-be champion Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. But they are the youngest team in NBA history to win 50 games and make the conference finals at just an average age of 25.1 years old. The next season would be the last of this specific core, and they would again find themselves at the top of the conference. Winning 47 games in a 66-game lockout-shortened season, they destroyed everybody they played in the West. They swept the Dallas Mavericks, who won the year before, they beat the Lakers in 5 games, and the Spurs in 6 games. Then they make the finals and face a pissed-off LeBron James, who's on his redemption tour after being embarrassed by Jason Terry the year before.
Magic, what do you expect from LeBron tonight? I want to see him, Stewart, have some fun, get into his defense, because the key is, can he stop Jason Terry?
Nowitzki wants the ball. Haslam again. Excellent ball denial. Terry, a long 3. Bang! Jason Terry gives the Mavericks a 7-point lead with 33 seconds remaining.
And so they get beaten 4-1 in the finals, and we were left with this now iconic shot of Westbrook, Harden, and KD. But what often gets lost about this series is the fact that every game was actually close except for maybe Game 5. The Heat won Game 2 by 4 points, and Games 3 and 4 by 6. And so people expected OKC to keep building around them, as it seemed like they were the next super team on the come-up. Now, fast forward to the offseason of 2012, where, just like the movie, it is now the beginning of the end. James Harden and OKC were expected to negotiate a contract extension. However, OKC would end up offering him too little for him to consider staying, and Harden being a better player than his role would allow him to show had something to do with them growing further apart, as Harden believed he was worth more. And so Harden would end up being traded from OKC to Houston, where he would be given a starting spot and become the star and focal point of the offense for years to come. But even though OKC still had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka, this would be the last time we would see them in the NBA Finals. In the 2012-2013 season, they would go on to win 60 games, which was good for first in the Western Conference. And Kevin Durant would actually end up having a 50-40-90 season. 28.1 points, 7.9 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.4 steals, and 1.3 blocks, while shooting 51% from the field, 41.6% from 3, and 90.5% on free throws. But their season would very quickly get derailed, as in the first round against the Houston Rockets, Russell Westbrook would end up tearing his right meniscus in Game 2. Well, more properly, bum-ass Patrick Beverley would end up tearing his meniscus while running into his knee going for a steal after a timeout was already called. And so that would pretty much end OKC's season, as they'd get past the Rockets, but lose in 5 games to the Grizzlies in the second round. And the next season would see Westbrook again injured, but this time KD would go completely off, averaging 32 points, leading the Thunder to 59 wins, winning his first MVP and 4th scoring title. However, they would lose in the Western Conference Finals to the soon-to-be champion San Antonio Spurs. The next season would truly be the beginning of the end, with Kevin Durant suffering a foot fracture before the season even started, and Westbrook also suffering an injury and being forced to sit out 14 games at the start of the season. The Thunder would start their first 15 games with a 3-12 record, and it also didn't help that Kevin Durant would end up making his return later in the season, but end up re-injuring his foot and be forced to sit out the remainder of the season. So with KD only appearing in 27 games, the Thunder didn't even make the playoffs in 2015. But as most of us know, the 2015-16 season would be the final year of OKC as we knew them. They came into the season with a new coach in Billy Donovan, but this didn't hinder them, as they would still end up winning 55 games and placing 3rd in the Western Conference, behind the 73-win Warriors and the 67-win Spurs. And they would actually end up beating the Spurs in 6 games in the second round, which at the time was surprising because everybody was expecting a Spurs versus Warriors in the conference finals. But instead we got Warriors Thunder, which to be honest was long overdue, and it didn't disappoint. With the Thunder taking a 3-1 lead over the Warriors, and it wasn't just the fact that they were up 3 games to 1, it was the fact that they were beating them so badly in those games that they were about to make the 73-9 record look like an absolute joke. But we all know what happens next. And so began one of the most anticipated free agency decisions since maybe LeBron's move to Miami. Kevin Durant chooses to leave the Thunder and go to the team that he just blew a 3-1 lead to, and the team that just won 73 games. In a move that people are still mad about, even today, and is still known as one of, if not the weakest move of all time. During the same offseason, Serge Ibaka would also be traded to Orlando in return for Victor Oladipo, leaving Russell Westbrook as the only remaining member of the Thunder's main core. But we would also see him have some of the best seasons of his entire career. He became the first player since Oscar Robertson to average a triple-double, and the first player to ever do it for 3 straight seasons. But this wouldn't result in wins, because even though the Thunder would later try to form a super team by acquiring both Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, they would end up getting beaten in 6 games in the first round by a Jazz team led by a rookie Donovan Mitchell, and next season would get beaten in the first round in 5 games by Damian Lillard's bad shot. And so this would cause Paul George and Westbrook to realize that they were probably never going to win in OKC. And so Paul George requested a trade and teamed up with Kawhi Leonard on the Clippers, and Russell Westbrook would request a trade soon after, with OKC eventually finding a package that would deal him to Houston in return for Chris Paul and a load of draft picks. And that's the end of the young, promising OKC core. Now, I want to note that it wasn't all that bad, because they did all end up becoming complete players once each of them left the team. Well, everyone except for Serge, but even then, you can't help but think, if they had the capabilities to have those amazing glow-ups, then you can't help but sit here and wonder what might have happened if they were able to keep the team together. But of course, it will always be a hypothetical. But I'm curious. Let me know down in the comments what you think they could have done had they not have split up. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell to be notified when I upload. Comment down below what you want to see next. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.